Unless you spent the last week under a rock, there's no doubt that you've heard about the Boston bombings. It was a tragedy that hit the U.S. a little over a week ago. This horrific tragedy got more than enough news coverage on CNN, MSNBC, NBC, and other news stations alike. But People magazine still finds that there's something going on in the celebrity world to talk about, and the Boston bombing takes the side of the page. This People magazine cover story leads me to this week's question. Is that really newsworthy? You're watching Victoria's Questions. According to MSN.com, Twinkies are headed back into stores in July, and that is newsworthy. Followed by the Twinkie story is a mother who's talking about her children being taken away from her after the Boston bombing. Not as important as the Twinkies, Lord knows I need my hostess. Yahoo.com's front page shows Glenn Beck, who is proposing a conspiracy theory that would explain the Boston bombings. Conspiracy theories are pretty legitimate, I guess, but I think that I would rather know a little bit more about the suspect that they've got, where the trial's at. I know that they're not charging him as like a terrorist, but he's being charged as a civil servant, so like any other citizen would be charged. So I'm a little more interested in that, plus I really don't care for Glenn Beck, and I don't know many people who do. If you go 4 news stories down from Glenn Beck's conspiracy theory, there's actually a relevant story about the suspect's father coming to the States. But before that is why Beyonce won't be at any shows. So there are other reliable news sources out there. If you go to CBS.com, you'll find some news stories that actually have relevance to you and your life and the things that are going on in the United States. They're covering everything from the Boston bombings to what's going on in Syria. On their front page today, you can see a Boston bombing survivor determined to dance again, a heartwarming story. There's also information about how the CIA had the bombing suspect added to the terror database before the attack. I heard rumors that the FBI didn't get him, or he didn't come up flagged because his name was put into the database incorrectly. It wasn't spelled right. Another story that's a little heartwarming after the survivor that determines to dance is the brother of the slain MIT officer, and he speaks at the Boston Memorial. After the break, we will have 2 HC students join me on the show, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what makes a story newsworthy and if it really should be. You're watching Victoria's Questions. Welcome back from the break. You're watching Victoria's Questions. On the show now, I have 2 Hastings College students. You guys want to introduce yourselves and tell everybody what your majors are?
Yeah, I'm Cassie Waldron. I am a senior biology major.
I am Waldron Brown. I am a sports and recreational management major. I do endorsement and coaching, and also play football.
All right, cool. So this week's pressing question, I've wondered why certain stories are considered newsworthy. So where do you read the news? I mean, do you stay informed, and like what kind of news do you go after? I'm sure sports news.
Yeah, of course that. I'm an ESPN junkie all the way. Mostly though, when it comes to politics and news and stuff like that, it's CNN. But besides that, there's been a lot of stuff on the Boston bombing.
Yeah, definitely.
Just crazy amounts of information on that dealing with the suspects.
Right.
Suspects, you know. But I think it's leading to people thinking that these 2 dudes are terrorists. Something. There's a lot of conspiracy about it too.
Whenever I look online for stuff, typically I get random things that I'm not really interested in, and I just kind of go through until I find something that's interesting. I think that TV news stations are better about broadcasting the right types of things, so whenever at work we have the news on, it's typically related to something that's, you know, has a life importance to it.
Right.
And internet-based stuff is more of the gossipy, appealing to, just trying to appeal to people to read it.
Yeah. Right after the bombing had occurred, the magazine People, they had an edition that came out, and the front cover was a celebrity, and on the side, as the news stories, that was covering the Boston bombing. So the celebrity took precedence over the bombing, but they said that that was just the West Coast edition, showing a really big divide in the country to think that, only because they're
Half of each other.
right, and so, stuff like that really makes me question, like, social media and, where it's going and what we find important,
I'm sure that the magazines, they probably did that. They probably had a contract with the celebrity first off to use the photo. So to pull out of that contract might have been, completely pull out of the contract might have been detrimental to their selling of the magazines and losing a lot of money to that celebrity. And so I think a lot of times I forget that they are making money. Like that's their goal overall, first part of the day and end of the day. Yeah, they give you the news, but they're there to make money. And so they're going to do whatever it takes to
get readers, get viewers.
Yeah, and so if there's people who are fed up with hearing about the bombing and stuff like that,
definitely
they're going to pull up that magazine and they're going to be like, I don't want this, I'm sick of hearing about this. And so when they put the celebrity on it with the bombings on the side, they're going to try to neutralize to that party. And so that's People magazine is typically
celebrities,
and it's typically the girls that want to read about how to do their hair and their makeup, and
what dress to wear, who looks good in this, and so who's gained 5 pounds.
And so they are going to advertise to that community what's going on. So
what do you think that says as us as a culture, that we would let stuff like that?
It says a lot, people are basically ran by entertainment, everybody wants to see something entertaining, especially after something like the Boston bombing, like people lost limbs, legs, everything, this is like, I don't even know if you want to call it a terrorist attack, because these guys have been here for God knows who long, And,
do you almost think that because there's been so much news coverage, during the first few days when the shootout occurred and the MIT officer had been killed, there was constant news coverage, and so many times news anchors had to retract statements and correct themselves because they had misspoken or said things that weren't necessarily true. And part of me also wonders, maybe we put too much attention on one item and not enough on others. Like the same day of the bombing, people won't remember, but Boy Scouts, an issue that had been brought up was allowing gay scout troops to be scout leaders, and they finally changed their perception on that, and they were going to allow that, which is monumental. But nobody's going to know that, because there's other things. So
I agree that sometimes it's overshadowed, but last night I did a little research. I went to Yahoo, and on the second page it was basically, the top news was Jay-Z targets Young Phenom, and
I saw that too.
And then I click over to see like what place the Boston bombing stuff would be in. And of course, it's the second page. They still keep it updated. They say official suspect amidst the role in the bombing. Everything. This, it's still there. It still hasn't gone away. Like, we haven't officially moved on from the crisis, but
in a way, it's not nearly as large a scale as 9/11, but wouldn't you say that this is somewhat similar? This is an attack on the American people, a huge function, and they are looking at it as an act of terrorism. So it's not nearly as large scale, like it didn't kill as many people, but still you'd think that they would be taking a different approach to it.
Right.
And instead of pointing fingers like it's this guy's fault, it's the FBI's fault, no, it's Obama's fault, stuff like that.
Well, we only know what media is going to tell us as American citizens. Like, we only know, especially if you weren't there to see it firsthand, what type of stuff was going on before the bombing and everything. You can't just jump to assumptions. You're left with only to believe the media. So.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many different aspects to every story, and so it's so difficult because, I mean, we don't know, you know, the past lives of the suspects. We don't know, I mean, we don't know everything about their lives.
Definitely.
We don't know their mindset, we don't know their upbringing, we don't, and so, I mean, that can change their view on things, and, you know, like you said, not being there, that's a different aspect, being able to experience it. And I mean, when you experience that fear and that terror, then that's going to be something that's a really big deal to you. And so when you just see it on the news, you still feel almost safe, because it's like, I'm in Nebraska, I'm fine. I mean, that's terrible.
Right, no, definitely.
America, but it's just, it's so hard when there's so many different aspects. And
would you say, I mean, at one point you've heard so much, I mean, I can remember sitting there watching the news for an hour, and it was the same thing being said over and over and over again, and the lower thirds were playing the same text constantly, but I couldn't turn it off, you know. And at what point it's just like, you know, where do you feel like you've got as much on the news as you want? Yeah. You know, and then when do you start to seek it out again?
Right.
And you have to wonder, are they making it known to us when there is new information, or is it still falling by the wayside?
Right.
Because even those people, you know, I agree with you. I totally agree. Because even with the people who are reporting it, the live reporters that are there, they're only allowed to do so much, and they have certain boundaries, you know.
Definitely.
That they can possibly know, because they can't just sit right there where the action is taking place, you know.
So I said earlier in the show that CBSNews.com is a great source if you want to get some straight news, you know, stuff that's pertinent and important nationally, internationally, and even locally. They've got information on there about the CIA and that they had bombing suspect added to the terror database before the attack. They're the only news website that's got this story. And not only that, it's not the top story, it's below the top story. And granted, the top story is important, it's about Syria, but it's out of our borders, you know, and this is something that is pertinent to American citizens because it makes you wonder, you know, these are the people that we trust our lives with.
I think that, like, the little bit of control, or the lot of bit of control that the government and, you know, the different, like the CIA and the FBI, they have a control over the media. And so when you have something like this where it's like, oh yeah, we could have prevented this by approaching this guy sooner and dealing with him sooner, and so when it puts them in a negative light, they're not going to want it to be publicized everywhere, and because they have that influence into the media.
So do you think that the government has a stronger hold over the more popular, I would say, I guess more advertised, like MSNBC is a huge ads section, like they get a lot of revenue from the ads that they run on their news station, and Fox News and CNN, but CBS and like PBS, those are the less biased just because they don't get that kind of funding from like ads. So would you say that the government might have a tighter hold on, you know, MSNBC and CNN?
That they would have to. Well, because I mean, when they're making that revenue, they're going to get taxed on that revenue, and so the government's going to be playing more of a role there. And so I don't know. I just think from the news that I see that comes on there, I feel that way. I mean, I don't have the background information.
You know, there's no way for us to really.
Right, and so it's just there's just certain things that you can tell where it's like, oh, you're kind of missing something.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. It's me personally, from my point of view and my perspective on the situation, I honestly think that there's something fishy about it. Because so-called we have CIA had the bombing suspect on the list of terrorists in their database already. But New Year's 2012, I believe, the president signed the National Defense Authorization Act, in which this allows our military to take people that are basically suspects of being terrorists to our country. If we have this guy in the database already, you know, this news is just leaked recently. Why hasn't the situation been taken care of? It leads to so many assumptions. You can go anywhere with this, you know. So I think our government can do a better job of securing certain situations, or even causing like certain things to be prevented, you know, happening. Like it leads the American citizens to ask, like, well, is the government really doing their job like correctly? You know?
And why are they hiding?
That's my opinion.
Yeah, a lot of it still hasn't been talked about, and it does make viewers, everyone, uneasy to not know the full story, you know? And I can't even imagine what the victims are feeling, to be like directly affected and to not know what is really going on. I want to thank you guys for coming on the show today, and it was a great discussion. It's a very heated debate. The news is always going to be talked about, and hopefully it's a little more honest than it has been in the past. After the break, we'll take a look at the student cam and see what some kids in HSU have to say about my questions. You're watching, you've been watching Victoria's Questions.
News online.
CNN. CNN. What do you like about CNN? I don't know. They always have it's always update, real current.
I usually use MSN.
MSN?
Yep.
What do you like about MSN?
I like the fact that the headlines are like right there. You don't have to like click on a lot of stuff. Like CNN, you gotta dive in there. Fox News, you know what I mean? I like MSN.
Like quick.
It's quick.
MSN.com.
MSN. Why do you like MSN?
Because that's where my email is, so it pops up with all the news and stuff like that, yeah.
CNN. CNN.
What do you like about CNN?
I don't know. It's just where I get the updates on my phone, so that's why I go.
Do you think that CNN news is reliable?
I think so. A lot of people watch it, listen to it, read it.
Do you ever feel like on MSN you have to weed through a lot of like kind of garbage articles to get to like actual news?
Sometimes, because there's a lot of like mainstream stuff, like the drama, they put that up there, so you have to kind of, if you're looking for something in particular.
I think it's biased sometimes.
MSN is?
Yeah.
Toward bias.
Just like the opinions, it's not very informative. It's more opinions of the writers.
I'd say if I'm looking for news online, I would probably go to like CNN first. But I actually get most of my news updates on my phone through like a CNN app or just like a New York Times app. Well, you'll hear people say that like different news stations are a certain way, whether that be liberal or conservative, but CNN might be more liberal, but I feel like they kind of tell more of the story sometimes than other stations do.
Do you ever use like Yahoo or MSN? Ever look at those sites?
I have looked at them in the past, but I feel like there's more, you know, like fluff news, as they call it. So you have to like search for the real news.
Not MSN. It's all pop culture. It's pop culture. It's not news. I'd rather go to like CNN.com or often I Google it, which I know that's the worst thing, but not MSN. Like CNN is usually my top choice.
Today we looked at news stories and websites to check out, is that really newsworthy? Next week's pressing question, I'm going to be talking about movie sequels, remakes, Scary Movie 4, 5, 6, 7, God knows how many. Because of all these remakes and sequels, I have to ask, why did they make another one? Thanks for watching Victoria's Questions.